She scared off 3 intruders with nothing but confidence. 5 days later, her own husband had her killed for the insurance money. This is the story of Nisha Patel Nazari, a London hairdresser and volunteer police officer whose murder exposed a web of betrayal that nobody saw coming. Section 1. The woman who confronted burglars and won. Nisha Patel Nazari was not the type of person you wanted to mess with. At 18, she opened her own hair salon in a single room of her brother's house in the Wembley district of London. Through sheer talent and relentless work ethic, she built it into a thriving business with over 2,000 regular customers. But hairdressing was only half of who Nisha was. She was also a special constable, a volunteer police officer who patrolled the streets of London without any authorization to carry weapons. In May 2006, just 5 days before her death, 3 men in dark clothing tried to break into her house. They were rattling her mail slot, clearly attempting to force their way in. Any normal person would have hidden or called for help. Nisha walked straight out the front door and confronted them. She was so confident, so authoritative, that the 3 men turned around and ran. Her brother Cadden had always begged her not to do police work. He thought it was too dangerous, especially since special constables could not carry weapons. But Nisha felt pride in what she was doing. London was still reeling from the July 7th bombings of the previous year, and she believed this was exactly the time when people needed to step up and keep their city safe. What Nisha did not know was that the attempted break-in was not random. It was very likely a reconnaissance mission, a dry run for what was about to happen next. Section 2. The last normal evening. On the night of May 11th, Nisha closed up shop and swept the salon floor. Her husband Fahd arrived with takeout food, and her brother Cadden came downstairs to join them. It was a warm, ordinary family evening. The siblings talked about their brother's upcoming wedding while Nisha carefully trimmed Fahd's hair. Their parents had both passed away years ago, so moments like these, the siblings looking after each other, preparing for family events together, carried extra weight. The couple's 3rd wedding anniversary had just passed the day before. Nisha was thinking about starting a family. She wanted children, and she believed this was the right time. But every time there seemed to be an opportunity to try, Fahd was either too tired or heading out with friends. Tonight was no different. Around 11, Fahd announced he was going out to play snooker with a friend, and Nisha swallowed her disappointment rather than argue. Cadden asked Nisha if she wanted to stay at his house overnight. He was still shaken by the attempted break-in at her place just days earlier, but Nisha said no. She and Fahd walked home together, just a block away, and Fahd left shortly after in his car. Nisha locked the doors, turned off the lights, and crawled into bed alone. Section 3. The Intruder in the Dark. About 30 minutes later, just as Nisha was drifting off to sleep, she heard footsteps inside her house. She had not heard a car pull up. She had not heard the door open. Just footsteps downstairs. After the break-in attempt less than a week earlier, her mind immediately went to the worst-case scenario. She did exactly what you would expect a special constable to do. She grabbed a flashlight, tiptoed out of her room, and crept downstairs to confront whoever was inside. Minutes later, one of Nisha's neighbors was woken by blood-curdling screams in the street. He looked out his window and saw Nisha in her nightgown, limping down the road, clutching a flashlight. He called an ambulance and rushed outside. When he reached her, she was hobbling back up her own driveway. She managed to choke out 2 words before collapsing. "I've been stabbed." The neighbor looked up and saw a man in a hooded sweatshirt sprinting away into the darkness. Another woman ran over with a towel and pressed it against the gushing wound on Nisha's thigh. Less than an hour later, Nisha bled to death on the way to the hospital. Section 4. A murder scene that made no sense. Detective Chief Inspector Nick Scola arrived at 17 Sudbury Avenue to find a chaotic scene. Paramedics loading Nisha into an ambulance, police tape going up, and a crowd of neighbors milling about in shock. A man pulled up in a car, crying and screaming hysterically, identifying himself as the victim's husband. Scola began processing the scene, and almost immediately things did not add up. Outside the house sat a stretch limousine and a black Humvee, flashy vehicles that screamed money. The obvious theory was a burglary gone wrong, but the front door showed no signs of forced entry. The back door was intact too. Inside, the living room was undisturbed. A wallet and a stack of cash sat in plain view, completely untouched. In the kitchen, Scola noticed a butcher block missing one knife. Critically, the block sat behind a row of champagne glasses that had not been disturbed. This meant the knife was removed carefully, during a period of calm, not during a violent struggle. Someone had come in quietly, taken the knife, and waited. The neighbor who had seen the hooded figure running away could not identify a face. Scola needed to talk to Nisha, but within the hour, he learned she was dead. Section 5. When the victim turns out to be one of your own. The next morning at Wembley Police Station, the mood was funereal. Scola learned that Nisha was not just any victim. She was a special constable who had worked alongside many of the officers in the building. The case was personal now. This raised a new and disturbing possibility. What if Nisha's murder was not random? What if she was targeted because of her police work? Scola learned about the attempted break-in 5 days earlier, and he was immediately suspicious. 3 men try to force their way into her house. She scares them off, and then 5 days later someone gets inside and kills her. That could not be a coincidence. Officers were deployed to identify those 3 men. Meanwhile, Scola launched a massive search for the missing kitchen knife, which he believed was the murder weapon. Dozens of officers scoured the neighborhood, checking bins, bushes, and storm drains with industrial vacuums. The knife eluded them for a month. Section 6. The husband with too many stories. While the physical evidence search stalled, Scola turned his attention to the victim's husband. Fod had a confirmed alibi. He had been playing snooker with a friend miles away at the time of the murder, and the friend verified it. But Fod also came in voluntarily with what seemed like a helpful lead. He played Scola a recording of a Scottish businesswoman screaming death threats at him over a disputed Humvee sale. Fod explained that he had sold a Humvee to a rival limousine company in Scotland, then rented it back under a fake name and driven it to London when they refused to let him borrow it for one last job. The woman was furious. On the voicemail, she threatened to kill both Fod and his wife. Scola sent detectives to Scotland to investigate. The lead went nowhere. Meanwhile, the case stalled. No suspects, no murder weapon, no progress. The media pressure was crushing. Then the knife turned up, found in a storm drain a block from Nisha's house, with her blood on the blade. Section 7. The gray Audi and a photo that changed everything. Scola ordered absolute secrecy about finding the murder weapon. If the killer learned police had the knife, they might flee. The next step was reviewing CCTV footage from cameras near the storm drain. London has hundreds of thousands of cameras, and officers spent a week combing through footage before finding something useful. A gray Audi pulled up near the storm drain, stopped for about 7 seconds, long enough for someone to dispose of a knife, and then drove away. The car passed through the camera's frame clearly enough to reveal a few identifying features: a roof antenna and a broken light above the license plate. For weeks, officers canvassed the streets of London looking for that specific Audi. They did not find it. Then Scola remembered something. They still had Fod's phone taken months ago to download that threatening voicemail. On a hunch, Scola had a forensic tech dump the entire phone. While scrolling through the data, he found a photo that blew the case wide open. It was a picture of a woman's thigh, clearly taken in a hotel room. The skin was pale white. It was not Nisha. When confronted, Fod denied the affair. Then, through the family liaison officer, he called back and confessed. Her name was Laura Makin, a Lithuanian sex worker. They had been seeing each other for 3 months before Nisha's murder. Section 8. The drug dealer, the hitman, and the key. An affair gave Fod a clear motive, but his alibi still held. Detectives brought Laura in for questioning. She had her own alibi, and eyewitnesses described the attacker as a man in a hooded sweatshirt, so she was unlikely to have committed the murder herself. The theory was that she may have hired someone, but there was no evidence. She was released. Then Nisha's brother Cadden, furious about the affair, shared something he had been keeping quiet. He told the family liaison officer that Fod had been worried about sketchy people in his phone contacts. Scola immediately ran every name in Fod's call logs. One jumped out: Roger Leslie, a convicted drug dealer. This changed the entire direction of the investigation. Scola had been looking for someone who wanted to hurt Nisha, but what if Nisha was never the intended target? What if the killer had come for Fod? Fod had run an escort agency before starting his limousine company. He was connected to criminals. He owed money. Any number of people could have wanted him dead. But the deeper Scola dug, the more a different picture emerged. Roger Leslie did not own a gray Audi. Phone traces on Leslie's calls, however, led to someone who did. And with that, every piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Section 9. The husband did it. The truth was devastating in its simplicity. Fod Nazari had hired Roger Leslie to kill his wife. Leslie did not want to do the job himself, so he outsourced it to a hitman named Jason Jones. A driver named Tony Emanuel provided the getaway car, the gray Audi. On the night of May 11th, Fod made sure to establish his alibi by going out to play snooker. He had given the hitman a key to the house. Jason Jones crept in through the back door, moved through the kitchen, and carefully pulled a knife from the butcher block. He thought everyone in the house would be asleep. Then he heard footsteps. Nisha was coming downstairs with a flashlight. Jones panicked, hid behind a wall, and when Nisha's flashlight beam landed squarely on his face, she screamed and bolted for the front door. Jones chased her down the driveway and plunged the knife into her thigh. Nisha fought him off and ran screaming into the street. Neighbors' lights came on. Jones sprinted to the waiting Audi. As they sped away, Jones threw the knife into the storm drain. From the car, he called Roger Leslie to report that the hit had gone catastrophically wrong. Leslie then called the man who had organized the entire thing, Fod Nazari. Fod wanted Nisha dead for the life insurance payout. He was deep in debt and wanted to run off with Laura, his mistress. While Nisha had been dreaming of starting a family, her husband was arranging her murder. Section 10. Justice and the Weight of Betrayal. 4 people were arrested and charged. Tony Emanuel, the driver, was acquitted. But Fod Nazari, Roger Leslie, and Jason Jones were all convicted and sentenced to life in prison. The attempted break-in 5 days earlier was almost certainly connected, likely a reconnaissance mission or a failed first attempt. The 3 men Nisha had so confidently confronted may well have been casing the house for the real attack. What makes this case haunt you is the bitter irony at its center. Nisha Patel Nazari was a woman who dedicated her spare time to protecting the public, who stood up to intruders without flinching, who embodied the idea that ordinary people can make their communities safer. She died because the one person she trusted most in the world, the man she had loaned money to start his business, the man she wanted to have children with, decided she was worth more dead than alive. She escaped death once. Her husband made sure she would not escape it twice.